Okay, great. And as I say, a real huge thank you for those who turned up. To suggest there's nothing terribly exciting on the television, or alternatively, as it quite properly should, that there's a real passion and interest in local government in this fantastic city. I'm going to introduce all of the panellists. They've got names in front of them. I'll introduce myself first of all. My name's Colin Manners. I'm one of the Pro-Vice Chancellors at the University of York. It happens my discipline is I'm a Professor of Political Science, but that's not why I'm here, and it's not actually what I do at the university. I sit in a lot of meetings. The positions I will refer to are the geographical positions and not the political ones. So, although there might be some coincidence, you can disguise yourself. On the extreme right is Councillor Keith Aspden, who has recently become leader of the Liberal Democrat group. Like at least a couple of other people on the panel, he's a former student of the University of York, a graduate of York, and now works in education at Lancaster Grammar School. I think he's been on the council for about 10 years. People never leave York when they come to university, which is great. James Alexander next to him is quite so recently elected as the member of the leader group, and is, again, he started as the youngest Labour leader.
He started as the youngest councillor in the country.
Yeah, right, crikey. Ian, you're in trouble. James was the youngest Labour leader of a council. And he wasn't, because somebody died, or somebody came on and somebody resigned or died, so he's again now. And he's making great changes in the city, some of which I'm sure you want to ask about. Next to him is Claire North, who is the proprietor of two businesses in York, namely Cabra Verde Tapas, restaurant on Peter Lane, and Declare Deli on Lendl. Opening hours are?
8 till 6, Monday to Saturday.
And menus will be available as you can. And surprisingly, she's on her honeymoon, I gather. David Erasmus over there. I'm not sure what this says about your marriage. He's a confident man if he thinks he can get away with this as your honeymoon trip.
He's promised me something in January.
It's particularly good to have Claire also as a voice of small businesses in the city of York. On my left is Councillor Andy Dagorn, who is the leader of the Green Group on the City Council again. He's been on 10 years, and he's a careers advisor at York College. On his left, again, geographically, positionally, not necessarily politically, is Gary Jones, who is the Chief Executive of York CBS, who, if I can volunteer this because I think it's something we'd all agree, is an organisation that does fantastic work with the community and voluntary groups in York. And certainly I know our students are heavily involved in many community-based things in the City of York, and it's something we encourage. And finally, as of course another youngest councillor in the country, we have Ian Lewis, who is the leader of the Conservative group, who's a relative newcomer since he's only been on the council 6 years, but I think his presence is very clear to understand. Okay, we've got a number of questions. Some people couldn't come this evening, nevertheless their questions I think are equally valid. And I'm going to wrap all of the questions up into one. Nobody actually asked this question, but I think implicitly all of them are asking this question. And that is, why does local government matter? Not many people are interested, not many people vote. Those who do vote tend to reflect their opinions about Westminster politics. So why do we worry so much about local government? James?
Well, I think local government is important because it is one of the closest representative bodies that exist that people can democratically elect to make certain decisions. Sometimes in Westminster I feel there's a bit of a disconnect with ordinary people about what's happening on their everyday lives, what's happening on their streets and in their communities. But with councillors of all political parties, they're much closer to living in those communities, not being in London all week, and understanding what's going on. But also there is a history to local government in terms of how we used to control police, fire services, health services and so on. And a lot of these functions like public health are now coming back to councils. So actually, more and more councils have responsibilities over local service delivery, either through themselves or through working with partners. And actually, councils need to become leaders of communities and places, rather than just simply looking at administering services and being really bureaucratic. And so I think it's incredibly important that people can elect their representatives to actually do what they said they were going to do and make that difference. And I know that sounds corny, but that's why I'm so adamant about us delivering on our manifesto pledges, because that's what we were elected to do, even the unpopular ones. People put their faith in us to be able to make sure that we deliver on that, and that's something we should do, and hopefully that installs a sense of trust that means in the future people will look more at manifestos in York, they will look more at what politicians promise, and actually see that their vote means something different. And I'm very proud of some things, like the living wage wouldn't happen if, my administration wasn't here in the council, and, that's people, voted for an ethos, and that ethos transferred into that policy. Some things they'll agree with, and some things they won't.
Is it more important on Westminster politics or less?
I think it's increasingly becoming more important. I mean, what I found fascinating is the recent debates that are happening about directly elected mayors. And when you look at what's happening around the country where directly elected mayors were created, a number of MPs actually stood down from Westminster to go for those positions. And directly elected mayors have exactly the same powers as I do, apart from one, which is my budget conferred on a simple majority and theirs is 2/3 majority. But apart from that, it is the same job. And if there was that thought amongst those MPs that that was the direction to go in, it shows the direction of travel that increasingly, under a government that's not my party political persuasion, localism and devolution is becoming more and more
Great, so
important.
that's tomorrow's headline, is it? Councillor Alexander says his wish is to be mayor of York and not an MP. Is that right?
No, not at all. Directly elected mayors, I think long-term may make sense if you start actually bringing together democratic accountability of all public services amongst the place. But at the moment it doesn't. You can end up with what the French call a cordon sanitaire, which is where the mayors of one party, the councils of another, they veto each other and nothing actually happens. And I don't think that works. You either do it or you don't.
I'm going to cut you off there because you're giving too long for the others to think of their answers. Liberal Democrats have always seen local politics as being their key arena. Is that your view as well?
Yeah, I think on the initial question we'll probably mostly agree that local government does matter, and actually I think people on the whole underestimate how much it can impact on their lives. And most people involved in politics would say that council leaders certainly have a lot more power and a lot more influence than the vast majority of members of parliament in terms of actually making decisions, making financial decisions and changing people's lives on a day-to-day basis. But I think for me as a Liberal Democrat, I would say that local government should matter even more, and there's still a job to do in terms of making sure that parish councils or local councils actually get more powers and get the opportunity to make even more decisions about their local area. And then when that happens, hopefully it will help engage more people in the democratic process, in knowing who their councillor is, in talking to us about it. Some of that has shifted and is coming across to councils, but I would say a lot more can be done, could be removed from Westminster and entrusted to local authorities to make a lot more decisions.
Yeah, presumably the Conservatives don't quite share that view since they're taking away lots of money and not really giving them very many.
Just making sure it's spent properly, Colin. I think the getting back to the question, why do people engage in local politics or don't engage? I think on a local level, people like somebody to blame, and I think if they've got somebody that lives locally and they can easily get in contact with, I think that helps. I think the situation as far as the local politics side, we have the local agenda. It's not, and people are interested in getting, the bins emptied, the streets cleaned, being kept safe, and to a lesser extent to the education side. And I think the situation is that whereas in Westminster, MPs are charged under the whipping system with, national politics and Europe and all the rest of it. Whereas here, it's far more tangible in a lot of people's eyes. It's what you see every day as you go around York in our case. But it is interesting that people come to me in the say, this bloody council is this, and to a lot of people, I am the council, you know, or we all are the council, whether we're in charge or whether we're in opposition or whatever, and people see the council as an entity and don't always necessarily split the various political groups. And some people say, well, why do we have politics in local government? You know, you need a concerted opinion by several people to actually get things through. So whether it's the Labour, Liberal Democrats or Conservatives or Greens, or whether it's the red, white, blue, pink party, it's immaterial. You need enough people of a similar mind in order to move things forward. And so on that basis, parish councils, for instance, Keith mentions parish councils. I've got 7 parish councils in my ward, and when you go to some are excellent. Others are, you would think they were running America, the amount of work that they put into things. But nevertheless, they all have a place, and it's all voluntary. And a lot of people want to do what they think right for their the area in which they live, and good luck to them on that. And I think we're all on it. Well, certainly I speak for myself, and I think I speak for everybody, not for personal gain, but you know, just to try and make a difference. You know, I'm not. At the end of the day, people will forget me the day after I've gone, but that's you know, I kid myself that I do try.
Okay, along with Claire's menu at the end of the meeting, there will be the name and address of the pub that Ian uses, so you can go and have a pint in the room. Is the Green a political party or a pressure group?
Green is a political party, very much so. We have about 130 principal councillors across the country. We have one MP now, as of 2011 elections in Brighton. So, yeah, we are very much a political party. And in terms of the question about why does local government matter, we very much put into practice the principles about thinking globally and acting locally and actually making a difference on the ground. All the parties now, I mean, since I got elected 10 years ago, you know, every party wants to be green, or at least have some green wash to its policies. But if it wasn't for the Green Party pushing that agenda, then there would be no incentive for them to do that. And I mean, that applies very much on a local level as much as it does everywhere else. You know, I mean, the Liberal Democrats do have a bit of a reputation for, you know, concern about the environment. But when I first became a councillor, the fact that we got elected, even though the Liberal Democrat administration, that made a big difference in terms of the changes that we see in the city, the improvements, the recycling, the solar panels, the renewable energy, all those sorts of issues which are our core concern about the environment and the planet, are taken seriously if we have elected representatives putting that forward, you know, and challenging the other parties to their seats if they don't actually sharpen up their act and deliver on those issues. We are also very much a party concerned about social issues as well, and social inclusion, opposing the austerity measures that this current government has put in place, and that the Labour Party nationally is committed to continuing if they're re-elected at the next general election. So we're very much challenging those and looking to alternatives to benefits cuts and attacks on the poorest in society to try and pay out the mistakes of bankers.
Gary, is there any point in having local government for you, since you now provide many of the services which the public sector is no longer funded to provide?
Yes, there is. Very clear answer. For me, the key word in this question is, why does a local government matter? And you could substitute that for, why does local business matter? Why does local voluntary sector matter? And it comes back to people in positions of power, whether they have that power through funding, because they hold all the money, through taxes, or whether they have that power because they're there to put in place the law or regulate or whatever. They make decisions based on that power. Those decisions have an impact on people, on all of us. And those decisions are never perfect. So the impact is never perfect. So there should always be some highly centralised, one of the most highly centralised countries in the world, and it means that loads of decisions get made in Westminster, they have an impact on us, and we never even get heard. So the impact never even gets heard back in Westminster. So for me, local government is the bit of government that actually does that rather well by comparison, could do it better, should be given more responsibility from central government, and should then pass that responsibility on further down to local communities, whether that's parish councils, community groups. So that's what's at the hub of this for me, is about decisions have impact on people, and you've got to make sure that those are tightly coupled, and local is the way to do it.
Does it matter to you as a small business?
Well, I think local government is the kind of the face of when you're in small businesses that can make your life easier or harder. And if I'm honest, local government for a lot of small businesses is seen as a barrier to getting on and to doing business. It's any interface with local government can often start with kind of a very negative approach. I don't think I've ever had a dealing with local government that started with, how can I help you? What can I do for you? How can we make this happen? It's always been, we've got 2 restaurants. The second restaurant we just wanted to open, we got planning permission, but the hoops and the loops that we had to go through because of an interpretation within local government, instead of saying this is great, you're opening a new business, you're going to employ these people, you've done all the right things. We were asked questions where we're going to put the cycle rack in a little restaurant off a little street in the middle of York, and I think from a small, speaking on behalf of my neighbours and small businesses, we just find there's a real disconnect between what we're trying to do and interfacing with local government, and I'm yet to find somebody who says, how can I help you?
Okay, good in practice, good in theory, but there's some irritants in practice. We'll come back to that, I think, once or twice. You need to make the answers fairly sharp, and I'm going to make the question fairly sharp as well. Should there be more houses in York, and if so, where? If you're a Green councillor, the answer would be?
Should there be more houses in York? Yes, we do need more houses. There are a number of sites around the city that already have planning permission where the house building is stalled since the recession. And I'm sure all the councillors here will be very keen to see that move forward as quickly as possible and to put those houses in place. I can mention Terry site, Sugar site, Hungate. There are these sites around the city that brownfield sites that need houses on them, and those brought back into use. We want more houses, but we also want them to be sustainable, both in terms of the environment, but also the costs and the social inclusion. So we want affordable houses in the city. We're stuck with a system that means that at present, it's very difficult to build council houses and social housing. This council, to its credit, is doing some council house building, but the local plan, which we may have a separate question on, I don't know, proposes 22,000 new houses in the next 20 years, which means expanding the city massively when we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So there's no point building houses if they're not sustainable in terms of the sewerage, the transport, all the other systems that need to go with that. And that would be our concern.
Are all the 4 political parties as of one mind on this?
No. Do you want to?
Please.
Okay. Well, basically, when you look at what's happened in York with regards to what's called a local plan, we've never had a local plan since 1956. And to put it into context, that was 4 years before my mother was born. And that means not having a local plan means you don't have a certain amount of certainty in your planning function, and then you get some of the problems that you mentioned by saying what that future of the city is going to be. Where are these homes going to be built, and how, and where's the employment sites going to be? You end up with no long-term vision for what the city needs to be able to represent the needs of people who live here and future generations. And when you look at our record of house building in this city, and there may be arguments over why that's the case, there's far, far outstripping supply. So there's a rise in the cost of housing. And when you look at rent prices, let alone prices to be able to buy property, the rent prices are going through the roof. My rent is £675 a month, and that makes up a significant percentage of my income. And you know, we've got a number of young people here now. I don't know how you're going to be able to afford to buy your own homes in New York, and I know that I currently can't. And I'm supposed to be the fat cat in charge of the council, and probably on more wages than most people in this city. And so therefore, you do need more homes. So the argument becomes where? Now when you look at brownfield sites, I mean, Andy mentioned a few of them. Terry's has just been bought by a new owner that clearly wants to get it developed and get new homes. Ungay retracted his costs there, which stimulated development, which then can sort out the rest of the homes on that site. And we have a number of brownfield sites across the city where progress is now being made. It's slow, but it is being made nonetheless. However, even when you build on all of those brownfield sites, and clearly in a place like York, you're not going to build really high because of views of the ministry and so on. You haven't got enough homes in the city to satisfy the current demand of people in York or their future generations. So then it becomes a question of what land you then put in. And the planning inspector recently said that we only have 4 years land supply for new homes. The government said you need a minimum of 5. And to have a local plan that stacks up and defines our green belt for the first time so you don't have uncontrolled development, you have to therefore put in more homes. And I would say that putting in some of the larger settlements which are proposed actually means you've got more of a chance of getting infrastructure put in there, which then satisfies those communities rather than just simply pegging on all the time expansions of existing settlements.
And the same who the Conservative Party is?
Yeah, I think obviously it's not about, we hear this term affordable houses and building affordable houses. What we need to do is build houses. Yes, okay, by nature of the different types of development, there will be some that are affordable. We need to obviously fill up the brownfield sites first, and there's some greenfield sites where it would be appropriate to build on, that there is no doubt. But the numbers are just ridiculous that's in the local plan. However, there's a lot of stuff in the local plan that would change communities, and that can't be right. And there's many contradictory factors, or contributory factors, should I say, why houses haven't been built in York. I mean, the financial situation is one. But the affordable housing policy that's been pushed by both this administration and the previous administration has actually led to developers not building. Where a developer has to build 50% affordable on a development of over 15 houses, or on a development of over 2 in a rural area, it doesn't exactly encourage them to build the homes. And especially when land prices have been, as they have historically been in the last, say, 10 years. And many developers have bought land, which is actually at the top of the market. The market has dropped a bit, and they are not, it's not feasible to build on that particular land. From a financial aspect I'm talking about now. So yes, we've got to get that moving. There's various ways we can get it moving. But at the end of the day, 22,000 new homes is just a figure that's been plucked from the air. So but we do need to build homes.
What do the Lib Dems stand on?
I think broadly all the opposition parties on the one hand agree that the figure of 22,000 homes across the city over the period of the local plan is just far too high based on infrastructure, the drainage, and actually what the communities of York actually want. It's one of the big things when you go and talk to people in all of the villages and communities around York, is that they do not want the reason many of them came to York, which is being special, having green views, having a feeling of space, not being in a huge city, destroyed in a plan. My concern with the way this has been tackled is that there was a draft local plan in place under the previous council, and Labour came in and rightfully wanted to review it. They have taken some consultants' reports, plucked the figures, as Ian said, out of the air, pitched them above what any of the consultants have said, and are now putting forward this plan that will have huge effects for decades to come. What we should be doing is, yes, looking obviously to build and grow the city, but we should be working with communities to to actually bring that about. And I think people generally agree, yes, brownfield sites, you've got to maximise the use of brownfield sites, you've got to include windfall sites, because often new sites come up and are available in York, and also you've got to capitalise on any new government funding around building more council housing in particular, as well as the affordable housing. But although we need growth, the figures and plans that are being proposed are far beyond what the city can cope with, and certainly the current infrastructure in parts of the city can cope with. And I think the council will get a shock when the local plan goes to inquiry, because it simply isn't sustainable, and they'll have a really tough job at arguing that. So I hope that now we're getting to sort of the end of the consultation period, that they will have a look again at the plans, at the figures and at the sites, and just make it a little bit more sustainable before it has that effect in York.
Presumably the business community are supporting more houses for a more vibrant economy and more customers for your restaurants? Or?
I don't think I've ever really thought about it in those terms. I mean, I think I probably agree that what we don't want is York to expand at a rate that we don't recognise York anymore, and I think that's the danger of these big developments happening, that what brought me to York from London was because it was a city you could walk around, it was what it was, and living in a city like that, house prices are going to be a bit more expensive. There is a trade-off for those sort of things, and you have to accept that. And I think, just building more houses and I hope they're going to bring prices down, I think is probably a bit naive, because I'm not sure that's how it would work. It might just drag more people in, because coming into the city, and I think we've got a great city, and I'm very loath to see it radically changed or enlarged, really.
If you built homes without affordable housing element, you would attract people who can afford those homes to York and wouldn't go to York residents. That's not what the local plan is about. And affordable housing targets, there's never been a prerequisite saying you have to have 50% affordable housing. It's been, this is what we would like. If someone comes along and says, this is 5%, it's the only way I can make it stack up financially. The council said yes. I don't see that as a problem, being able to try and get affordable housing for your residents. And I know, Keith, you're saying you spoke to villagers and they're concerned that they come to York and that's the views that they have. But what about people who were born and brought up in this city, in Tanghall, in Chapelfields, who currently are saying to me that they're giving up hope of even renting their own home, let alone buying a home? Surely they should be given some hope. Surely they should be able to help get a home of their own, even if it's rental. And in terms of maximising brownfield sites, I understand where you're coming from, Keith. What you're talking about is high density housing, and I think that that doesn't create good communities. It doesn't create a situation whereby people feel that they are a part of a community. You end up feeling you're just put in some kind of box somewhere. I don't think that's appropriate. The government, new government's legislation and guidance with regards to that has reduced it. And with regards to rate of expansion, what we're actually talking about is 1.8% more draft greenbelt land than the previous plan. I don't think that's huge. If you want to look at reality from now, it's 4.4%. But if that solves our homes crisis, I think that's the right thing to do.
The word community has been mentioned quite a lot. Community is one of your raison d'etre. So is this helping? Is
Housing.
or anything?
Is there a big problem with the difference between renting and buying in York? Yes, massive. Are there loads of people who want to move here and increase the demand? Yes. Is there lots of existing residents for which, they term affordable housing, that means that actually most of the housing now is unaffordable, which is a kind of a bonkers statement, really. So it means that one of our basic human needs, shelter over our heads, for most people is unaffordable, i.e. unattainable. They're not going to get one of their basic human needs, which is, it's just a very strange phrase, I think. I know it's not James's phrase, it's a commonly used phrase. This issue of housing is just so much more complicated than we can really begin to get to grips with. Even the local plan is however many thousands of pages. I was just wondering if anyone in this building has even actually read it all. It's so complicated. Some of that is imposed on you by central government. There's just such big issues. There's national population, migration levels. There's a whole load of stuff about demographics and loads of more people living on their own, where they would have stayed with families or got married or been living with other people. There's a whole load of stuff about the fact that so many jobs and careers now are why people are moving more and more to cities. And I just feel really torn on it as an issue, because I think from a kind of ground up community level, when I say yes, of course we should build houses for people that need them, but on another level, I don't want York to turn into London, because actually that ain't why I moved here, and that isn't why most people live here. So I think unless we have some of the more fundamental conversations about this kind of growth-driven economy towards bigger and bigger cities all the time, and more service industry, we're missing half the argument with housing, I think.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick straw poll, and the way of doing these things, there's a little acronym called BANANA, isn't there, in this sort of area, which is build absolutely nothing near anyone at all. Who's persuaded by the argument that it would be nice if you could restrict it to the brownfield sites, but the reality is you need to upset people and move into other areas, and if the consequences might change the character of York, then that's the price that has to be paid for giving people the opportunities that James described. Who would favour that view?
Depends what the other options are.
The other option is the more restrictive one, that you actually concentrate housing where it doesn't have that same environmental impact.
That's also not an option. The government hasn't given us that option.
Well, let me see the preference. Who would prefer that latter view? Still a bit of work to do. Okay.
I think one of the things, Colin, that's changed in York over the last few years, well, the last sort of 30 years, is the advent of the success, to be fair, of the universities. And, you know, James mentioned Town Hall. Well, I was a Town Hall lad. I was brought up in Town Hall, managed by my own house. But when I was in Town Hall, there was no York University as such. And of course, the profile of the Town Hall area, York area, Osborne area, has changed dramatically because of the university. Now, we celebrate the success of universities, but it's had quite a big effect on the housing and the, you know, we mentioned communities before, of the communities in certain areas of York.
Well, why is it right for your generation to be able to own their own home, but we should be excluding people of my generation? Because I'm sure we both work as hard as each other. I don't think that's right.
Well, my daughters are of your generation, and they both own their own homes.
What we're in danger of is we already have a key council officer, senior officer commuting from Scarborough so many days a week. He doesn't do a full week any longer. We're in danger of becoming like Cambridge, and people who work in Cambridge, whether it's Microsoft or university, if you live places like Kings Lynn and commute, Cambridge is unaffordable. You want that to happen in York.
Okay,
It's not because you can't afford to live here, I'm sure.
I think we will. We're not going to have a personal